Hi, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name's Lee. Today I want to talk about saying the quiet part out loud. Now, at the end of last week, Biden went on a trip to Europe where he met with the EU, the G7 members and the members of NATO. And as part of that trip, he gave a speech to government officials and dignitaries in Poland, and he highlighted the fact that we are now in a conflict between democracy and autocracy. Now, towards the end of that speech, he then came out with a comment which pretty much stunned not just everybody that was at that meeting, but also pretty much the world. And that comment was about the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. And that comment which Biden said was, and I quote, "For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power." Now, I'm sure you've all seen the clip, but if you haven't, here it is again.
Bent on rebuilding an empire will never erase a people's love for liberty. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principles, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
Now, it's quite clear from everyone present that Biden was calling for the removal of Putin. And before I give you my thoughts on this, I'm just going to read you a few excerpts from an article that was published by the BBC and talking about how dangerous these comments potentially are. So, first of all, from the article, the Russian spokesman Dmitry Peskov said about the speech, "This speech and the passages which concern Russia is astounding, to use polite words." And then very quickly, the US tried to walk back what Biden had said. And the quote from a spokesperson at the White House was, "The president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbours or the region," a Biden administration official said on background. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. But the speed at which the US issued its clarification, which was later echoed by Blinken, suggests the US understands the danger inherent in Biden's words. And the article then goes on to say, even some US allies were attempting to distance themselves from Mr. Biden's remarks. French President Emmanuel Macron warned that the US president was putting ceasefire negotiations between Russia and Ukraine in jeopardy. "We want to stop the war that Russia has launched in Ukraine without escalation," he said. "If this is what we want to do, we should not escalate things, neither with words or actions." And in Washington, congressional leaders were also expressing concern. Idaho Republican Jim Risch, the senior Republican on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, called Mr. Biden's remarks a horrendous gaffe. "My gosh, I wish they would keep him on script," he said. "Anytime you say, or even, as he did, suggest that the policy was regime change, it's going to cause a huge problem. This administration has done everything they can to stop escalating. Not a whole lot more you can do to escalate than call for regime change." Okay, so that's what the BBC said. Now, my thoughts on this is that I don't think this was a gaffe. I think Biden knew exactly what he was saying, because this has pretty much been the policy all along. If you remember, when the economic sanctions were put in place on Russia, this was what the talk was about. It was about inflicting as much financial damage on the Russian economy, that the ruble would collapse, there'd be hyperinflation, and then the people would, within Russia, would revolt and overthrow the government, hence enabling regime change. And it's obvious that this plan hasn't worked. The economy in Russia has not suffered anywhere near like the Americans and its European allies had hoped for. And one other thing about regime change is this is from, you know, the standard playbook of the USA. They often push for regime change, and we've seen this in many places around the world in wars, and the way they apply sanctions, whole sanctions on places like Iran and Venezuela and other countries are to try and force regime change in those countries. And I just think it's absolutely the height of stupidity for the leader of one nuclear superpower to go to a country directly on the border of another nuclear superpower, i.e. Russia, and start calling for the president of that country to be overthrown. Anyway, in that same tour, as if that one statement wasn't bad enough, there was then another statement he made while addressing the one division of the American Army. And I'll just play that clip for you now.
But also the average citizen. Look at how they're stepping up. Look at how they're stepping up. And you're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle of front of a damn tank, just saying, I'm not leaving. I'm holding my ground. They're incredible.
So you can see clearly from that clip, he says to the 82nd Airborne Division, when you are there, meaning when you are in Ukraine. Now, I'm sure that wasn't a slip of the tongue. He's obviously picked that up from somewhere now, whether it's that he's picked that up from something that's been talked about in the White House or at the Pentagon. You know, is it part of a false flag operation that are being planned? I really don't know, but he's definitely picked that up from somewhere. And it's again yet another example of Biden saying the quiet part out loud. Anyway, that's my take on it. That's my opinion. That's my thoughts. Love to know what you think down in the comments below. So get active in those comments. But as always, for now, take care.